Hello, what's up again there, guys? Brian here, the 3 Topic Scammer here to share with you another one of my weekly Q&A to help the people's questions or answer a series of questions that have been sent to me over the past week. This was another solid episode. I think I had maybe one new person, so that's good. But overall, I'd say everybody sent in a pretty solid question. So, like always, if you do happen to enjoy this video by the end, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep track of me on my future videos I'll be uploading for my channel. And yeah, make sure if you just double check, make sure that subscribe button is pressed, because the algorithm's been acting a little bit funny as of late. So I kind of want to make sure my numbers keep going up, and the channel has been growing a little bit slower than I would expect, but hopefully that'll pick up as we get farther into the year. So, starting off with the first question, coming from Zach Tarf, you want to know, so do you think you're going to like Chris in Resident Evil 8? He was kind of not a nice guy in the game. Well, I already know what happens in a game. I may not have played Resident Evil 8, but I know how the whole game plays out. So I know all the twists. I know how to beat all the bosses. I know where to go. So, he had his reasons to do what he was doing. So I thought it was just kind of, no, that's Chris Redfield for you. I mean, nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing we hadn't seen before. So, nothing about his actions surprised me. Next question comes from Black Shadow Knight. You want to know, would I rather live in a bungalow or a one-bedroom apartment, assuming you're living alone? Oh, absolutely a one-bedroom apartment, but I would kind of want to prefer I had like a two-bedroom apartment. That way I could keep one bedroom as a bedroom and the other bedroom as an office. Like right now, my setup here, this is the first time in 5 years that my workspace and bedroom have not been in the same place. Like, the area that I'm occupying right now is actually the dining room. We don't have a dining room. I actually converted it into my filming location. So I'm actually I like having my two different spots. I spend the most time in different locations. But I certainly could make it also work with a one-bedroom apartment. So yeah, that's one I would go with. Brady Burrick wants to know, do you think Lucasfilm will eventually pull the trigger and make the Old Republic series? I hope not. I hope not. I really don't want them to attempt to do that, simply because I do not trust Disney with this franchise of Star Wars right now. If they did try to do an Old Republic, it wouldn't be anything like we knew before. There would be a very distinct difference between Disney's take on the Old Republic and the original take of the Old Republic, and I think most people would be just disappointed. I mean, they just axed the main game right now, and people were so hyped from that. And if you actually look into it, they were pretty far in development for this canceled Old Republic game. So things in Lucasfilm must not be in a very good spot. So as of right now, I really hope they don't do it. I'm not the biggest fan of the Old Republic, but I know that there are a lot of people are. But at this point, let's just leave it alone and just remember it as good as it used to be. Next question comes from Shaudisis Gaming, and this was a really confusing question because it kind of threw me off. But you want to know, who do I think is worse? Dahmer, this Gacy, who I've never heard of, and Bundy, and why? Well, I think Jeffrey Dahmer cut up people, and Bundy's the guy who was just killing a bunch of women, so I don't really know how you pick. And I don't even know who the second person is. I've never even heard of that name, but I don't really think you could say either one is worse than the other. They're both awful people. They are both just crazy serial killers. I mean, it's like freaking, would I rather want to have my head cut off by a sword or having my head cut off by a guillotine? I'm like, they're both bad, equally bad, with the same result. So I don't think I can pick one who's worse, because they are both really awful people. Next question comes from the Batman of New Gotham. You want to know, besides The Last of Us, are there other video games you came across that you personally found were overrated while everyone else treated them like they were masterpieces? Oh, absolutely. Red Dead Redemption. I played that game for like an hour and I got bored of it. So I don't know why people act the way they do towards Red Dead. I didn't really care much for that. Gears. People thought Gears was amazing, and I only played Gears once when I had an Xbox, because I needed to know what my competition was up to, and I was like, this is one of the best games that Xbox can come up with, and I never finished it. I got maybe halfway through, and I decided, you know what, this game is just not working with me, and I ended up quitting, and I turned in my Xbox the next day, and I got another PlayStation 4, so Yeah, just those are just the two that come to mind in terms of people thinking that they're masterpieces, and I just thought they were a bit overrated, not that great. Next question comes from Cinevic. You want to know what do moving forward. Remember, people try to keep it to one question per person instead of like you have one question that leads to another question. That kind of annoys me. But you want to know what do I think Solid Snake did in his last days after the events of Resident Evil Metal Gear Solid 4? Do you think he learned to enjoy life and never fully recovered from his desire to fight? I'm sure he was fine retiring, and he just lived a quiet life until he eventually passed away. I don't see him wanting to go back into combat, especially after what he had just gone through in Metal Gear Solid 4 and what Big Boss had told him about how he had a chance to do something that the other snakes couldn't do, and that was just live as a man and not as a snake. And I think those words really would have rung true of Snake, who at that point was just tired of combat. It had worn down his body. He shouldn't spend the last of his days just trying to fight, and he had done everything he could. I think when he passed away, I think the world was in a better place than when it was when he was first created. So that's what I think. Again, I'd like to acknowledge Revengeance as canon, because if you did, then you would realize that everything that happened in Metal Gear Solid 4 was pointless, but again, that's like an alternate timeline game. I prefer to say that this series ended with Metal Gear Solid 4. And the last question of the episode is, without question, my favorite question that I got so far, because it speaks to something that's really been bothering me for years. But this is the only new person, and you had like two names. You go by DPman39 or Depora1979, odd name. But you want to know, will I be calling the new God of War Ragnarok or 5? Because I think it's better to just call it 5 and avoid confusion. Kind of like Ghost of Sparta and Chains of Olympus are side games, so many think Ragnarok is a side game because it's not titled 5. I have been saying this since they gave the announcement for God of War 4. Why don't you just call it God of War 4? That's what I call it. I don't just call it God of War. God of War, the real God of War, came out in 2005. The game that came out in 2018 was God of War 4. It rebooted the franchise, but it was a continuation of the story that we knew. And it had plenty of callbacks to the original game. So just because you reinvent the game doesn't make it a completely new, rebooted series. It's God of War 4. And so this one, I'll be calling it God of War 5 Ragnarok. Not just God of War Ragnarok. That's confusing. And yes, just like Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta, people think this is a side game. And so, like, if I really had a chance to speak to Sam Monica, I would just ask them, why don't you just call it God of War 5? Like, if Final Fantasy can go all the way to 16 and not be confusing, if Street Fighter can go all the way to 6 and not be confusing, if all of these long-running franchises can go to higher and higher numbers and just to not confuse people, why would God of War want to start doing that now? I mean, it's just annoying. So, no. When I do my review, when I start playing this game, I will be calling it God of War 5 Ragnarok. That's so simple. There's nothing wrong with having numbers and a subtitle. There's nothing wrong with these. I mean, unless you're like the MCU films, where you have to do research to know what film took place at what time, but that's another story. But yes, yes, that is what I will be calling it. God of War 5 Ragnarok. And that'll do it for this episode of my weekly Q&A. I want to thank everyone that sent in your questions. And remember, if you guys have any more questions you'd like me to answer in next week's episode, be sure to type them in the comments down below. But make sure you get them into me roughly before next Wednesday, before noon, before I start filming the next episode. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I'll see you all next time.